to be here in Riyadh at the Innovation Week to speak about one of my favorite topics. I think we've just heard Christine, and Christine is one of the most passionate person I know about food. Maybe I'm the second most passionate person about food. I think food is wonderful because it's really at the heart of each and every one of us. It's what connects us to our family, to our background, to our culture. It connects us to our health, our well-being, and it's also, of course, connected to the health of our planet. Today, we will be discussing resilient food systems, and in particular, different approaches and strategies and lessons learned from resilient food systems. I don't want to repeat too much of what Christine has already been saying about the fragility, the complexity of our food systems worldwide. We know that there are massive stresses such as climate change, demography. We also know that we need a big systems transformation to make our food and our agriculture more resilient, more just, to also be able to have more production by 2050. I think we need an additional 50% of food production to feed the world. Christine has mentioned all of that, and the complexity is interesting because, and I think that's why we haven't been focusing on food systems until quite recently. In fact, a couple of years ago, I was one of the UN Food Systems champion when the Secretary General of the UN convened the first ever food summit to really think in a systemic way about food systems. And this is necessary because food systems encompass very different things, from agricultural production to food supply chains, distribution networks, consumption patterns, innovation, etc. So to help us navigate through these very complex issues, I'm very privileged to have three amazing panelists with me. And we're going to start maybe focusing on the challenges and strategies in the kingdom, and then expand to the more regional and global level. So maybe let's start with Mr. Khan. You are the Chief Strategic Officer at Tanmiah Food Company. Tanmiah Food Company is the largest second poultry player in the kingdom. And I thought it would be very interesting for our audience to understand what you do specifically at Tanmiah to contribute to food security in the kingdom and water preservation goals in general. And of course, I understand you also have a lot of international experience. It will be interesting to see how what you've seen elsewhere in the world maybe has contributed to your thinking and your strategy.
Sure. You can hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So I think the way we should look at the food, the lessons learned from the food resilient systems globally, and particularly in the context of Saudi, is that, to me, it's a continuum of the same, both ends. One is how we are increasing the food production, which is the self-sufficiency targets of Saudi. And then at the same continuum, at the other end, is how we are making sure that food wastage is curbed, is controlled. Right? So I would like to take a global view first before we delve into what Tanmiah is doing, because this is the same thought process we used when we developed our own strategy. If you look at the food wastage globally per capita, it's approximately 115, 120 per annum per capita. That's the global average. KSA is 250. It's almost double. There is something that we are not doing correct. So to me, while we grow, because food sufficiency target of Saudi as part of Vision 2030. But at the same time, there is a critical need to talk about the policies, to talk about the cultural change, to talk about areas where we can reduce the food wastage at personal level, at corporate level. I'll give you an example. In 2018, I think, France introduced a mandatory policy for the supermarkets to not to, anything left over has to be donated edible to food banks.
And charities.
Yeah, exactly. And that helped big time during COVID crisis. In Rwanda, they have historically relied on two crops, coffee and banana. They went for diversification, wheat, barley, etc. Saudi, because of its geographical position, gets impacted when we have regional geopolitical situations. We are in arid zone, so there's a huge water issue. I was in an earlier session I was mentioning we have 2.4 million liters of water, natural resources, versus Brazil, it's 8,200 trillion liters of water. Right? So we have to look at from both the angle, how to increase the production capacities, but at the same time, how to make sure that the food wastage is reduced. With this thought process, when we developed our own strategy at Tanmia, we grew, so we took the expansion. I'm responsible for organic and inorganic growth and expansion. Currently, we are doing, let's say, one of the KPIs that is used in the poultry sector is how many birds you are processing every day. And that then can be translated into the water and food waste that produces. We are doing 500,000 birds per day. The plan is to grow up to 2 million birds per day, right? In a sustainable manner. Now, that means that also the food waste, the wastage, the water, and the solid waste that comes out with it is going to grow drastically. So what we are doing is we are looking at circular economy. 2 hours drive from Riyadh, we are irrigating 1 million trees. We already have 500,000 trees there using the treated water from our production facilities. What we are also looking at, and that is, to me, it's a game changer, is research and development and innovation in using alternative proteins. Everything that poultry and ruminant eat comes from basically imported from Europe, from Brazil, from Ukraine, etc. Okay? If we grow something locally, that would be a game changer. And alternative proteins, as I mentioned, so we have piloted a project using black soldier fly, which uses 95 to 99% less water as compared to the traditional corn and soya that is imported.
Thank you so much. So sustainability is obviously one of the key issues when we're discussing resilience in food systems. Maybe turning to more global initiatives, Dr. Rain, you are one of the professors at the University of Chicago and also an artisan of a major initiative called the Global Flagship Initiative for Food Security. I think it would be super interesting if you could tell us more about this initiative and how it contributes to food resilience and also how it relates to what's happening in the kingdom.
Yeah, thank you very much and a very good afternoon. My name is Konrad Rein. I'm a German national living in Brussels the last 10 years, where I worked almost 9 years for the European Commission spending most of my time coordinating and leading on issues related to food security at the European Union level, G7 level, and G20 level. And I've also been the chair of the Global Donor Platform at IFAD in Rome. Then last year, in August, I joined the Innovation Commission, which is a 2-year commission chaired by Professor Michael Kramer, a Nobel laureate in economics at the University of Chicago, who established this commission to identify and promote the scaling of evidence-based, cost-effective, and scalable innovations that on one side tackle the food crisis, hunger, and on the other side, the climate crisis. And we are really thinking in the millions here. So these are innovation cases, such as you mentioned, alternative proteins, but also weather forecasting, digital agriculture, rainwater harvesting, etc. If you scale these things, you can really have a massive impact, reach millions, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people. And the inspiration was the Health Commission of the 90s, when hundreds of millions of people were vaccinated against tuberculosis. So we are really taking an economic approach, and we are working with anybody who is interested in these topics. Now, one of the major leads that evolve out of this Innovation Commission is the Global Flagship Initiative that we have launched on Agri-Food Systems Day here at this very COP in Riyadh last week on Thursday. The Agri-Food Systems Day, we joined forces with the Arab Coordination Group, Islamic Development Bank, OPEC Fund, AG Fund, Badea, but also a range of more than 10 governments from around the world, including China, governments from Central America, the US, European Union, African Union, the private sector, civil society, and many others. And basically, it has become a global initiative already. We started with an emphasis, with a focus on the Sahel, but desertification is a global issue, and it is related to water, to biodiversity, to climate. And the idea, the focus of the initiative is really impact. So we did not only launch the initiative last Thursday, we already announced the first 2 projects that will basically kick off immediately. One being the scaling of rainwater harvesting in Niger, and the other one being digital agriculture, weather forecasting for 7 million people in Ethiopia. So it's really a focus on impact, and what is new with this initiative is, first of all, that we are working with anybody who has an interest or who's dedicated to SDG 2, leaving politics aside. And I think when I named the governments that are already behind this and the entire Arab Coordination Group, as per their communique that they published last week on the 3rd of December, it's really a huge momentum that we are trying to create here. And the second thing is the private sector. Since 20 years in development policy, people talk we need the private sector, to accelerate progress on SDGs, on SDG 2, etc. But it's not happening at a large scale. So the private sector will have a very strong role in this flagship initiative over the next 5 years. And we are now establishing a secretariat for the initiative at the COP Trust, an international organization in Bonn. So I'm actually now already in transition mode, and from University of Chicago to open and lead this initiative then from the COP Trust, because this will bring additional, let's say, convening power, and having a neutral, well-recognized and established international organization as leading this whole initiative moving forward is very good. And the last thing I say, we are very much open to work with all of you, so please reach out, and exciting things will happen in the next year as well in terms of events. Thank you.
Oh, that's impressive. That's very impressive.
Thank you so much. We've talked about sustainability, impact, public-private sector partnerships. Perhaps another issue which are really important when we speak about food systems resilience is justice. And I know, Dr. Chandrit, that this is an issue which is particularly close to your heart, just and inclusive food systems. You're a senior research fellow at Oxford Said Business School. Can you tell us why it is so important, and what is your research about, and your view?
Thank you, Anne, and it's a pleasure to be here talk about something that's very close to my heart. You know, when we look at food systems, we produce enough food to feed 8 billion people. You know, yet when we look at the system, we see that, 1 in 11 people in the world wake up hungry. And that number dramatically increases when we look at Africa. 1 in 5 people are hungry. 70% of people in the world can't afford healthy, nutritious food. Yet, in low-income areas, yet that number drops to 5% when we talk about higher income places. 20% or 22% of children are stunted under 5 because they don't get the right nutrition. And that has long-term impacts. 5% kids are obese. So when you look at these dynamics, one would argue that the food system is broken. And I would argue, no, actually, the food system is working perfectly. It's working perfectly for the outcome it was intended to be, to benefit certain actors. And so they are benefiting. So there's no incentive to break that system. And that's the big challenge we're seeing. So in order for us to really think about, when we talk about a systems change, creating a just system, we have to think about what are the outcomes that we really are looking for. What outcomes do we develop, and who are these outcomes need to be developed for? And so we have to go back to that basic drawing board of saying, what does a just system look like? And I'll share some examples of the challenges. And I know we want to get to solutions, but because we want to set the right outcomes, we really need to understand what is keeping the status quo. What's the inertia in maintaining the system as it is, despite producing so much food and, to your point, wasting so much food. So we really need to understand this. And so we did this research. We convened, large corporations. We got social scientists. We got researchers, farmers. I myself spent a lot of time working with local farming communities on ground in East West Africa to understand what are the challenges. And I'll give quickly 6 challenges, 6 inertias, or 6 what we call the dilemmas in the food system that we need to overcome to build a just and equitable food system. The first dilemma that we see is that there is fragmented action. And when I see fragmented, I see many large corporations, we have an excellent example, doing excellent work. They're going in, they're thinking about those challenges, but that often does not translate into industry-wide challenges. Often organizations like yours have to bear the cost. Not others are not willing to bear that cost. So it disincentivizes many players because they feel, oh, it's a cost I don't want to bear. I don't want to be the first mover, I'll be the third mover. I'll be the fourth mover when the industry is set up. So who is going to bear the cost? That's the first challenge we're seeing. Second is we have to think about inclusivity, lack of voices. 500 million smallholders feed 80% of emerging market economy population. So how do we bring them in this conversation? Now the challenge is we all talk about multi-stakeholder approach, and in principle that is the key approach. But every stakeholder that is added in that process adds more complexity to it. There are different voices, there are different incentives. How do we get smallholders to work with large corporations? And so that's a dilemma we're seeing, like what would that structure look like? Adding more actors, but ensuring that the complexity isn't there. So that also dissuades businesses or large corporations to kind of work, not engage many of these actors. We're seeing complex reporting. This is something that's coming in, new sustainability standards, emission reporting, scope 1, 2, 3. Lots of requirements are coming in. When we talk to large corporations, they're like, their CFOs, sustainability people are like, we don't know what to do. So what we're also seeing is that they're simplifying themselves. They've started to, many have stopped working with small, many actors. Instead, they would say, we would like to work with few supply chain suppliers, which are already large. So that also has an inclusivity problem, because suddenly we're moving away from smallholders to medium and large holders because of the reporting requirement. We see misaligned incentives. Who will, in this whole process, who will bear this cost? And often, the cost is transformed, like, businesses will come and say, they'll ask their supply chain supplier to say, you need to like give us better products. The sustainability is your challenge. The supply chain will go to farmer and say, actually you have to build those practices. So often we see the costs being pushed down. And so we need to understand who will actually fund this transition. How will we find the right suppliers that can actually then provide? How do we align the farmers? So we're seeing a misalignment of this incentive. Data transparency is a big challenge. When we work in complex system like a food system, which goes from all the way to consumption to production, like we say, what is it like from fork to farm?
Farm to fork.
Farm to fork. So many different actors are in place. How do we ensure that the data is moving along? Who's actually in charge of that data? How do we get the data from the farmer to get to the supplier onwards? So we're seeing a big challenge in that data transparency, and if the data isn't correct, how can we take evidence? So your example is excellent because it's now using evidence-based decision making. So we're trying to overcome some of those things. And then finally, I think we have to think about consumers in the mix. That what is their demand? And so consumers want nutritious, healthy food, yet we're not seeing that. Like, as an example, if we just look at US, we have this terminology having like food deserts, that almost 18 million people in the US don't have access to fresh food. They don't live close enough, they can't drive. And we're talking about a most developed country. So then it's also about like, how do we bring the right consumers in the place so we're offering them what they require. So when I collectively put all these elements together, we need to get the right outcomes for the system we want. And right now, we're not sure what those outcomes are.
Thank you so much. We're running a little bit out of time, and I wanted to be able to give you one more time the floor, and maybe specifically to talk more about innovation, sustainable innovation. We know that we need more innovation, we need finance, we need ideas, as we've discussed, but perhaps you've launched some very interesting challenges at Tanmiah, two big challenges, I believe. Can you tell us specifically, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time, so in 2-3 minutes.
Sure. So Tanmiah has launched two grand challenges. We call them $1 million challenge. The first challenge was on the downside of the downstream, how to manage the waste, poultry waste. So we call this project Waste to Value, from poultry manure to something value added. Our startup from King Abdullah University of Science and Technology won that project. $1 million was given, and they are converting chicken and poultry manure to biochar, and from biochar to biodegradable plastic for irrigation. The second challenge, which we are, inshallah, should be finalizing in Q1 of 2025, is how to remove climate and environment from the irrigation system and grow the corn and the soyas that we import from Brazil and rest of the world locally. So these are the two main challenges. Just to give you a quick number, 1 kilogram of corn requires 900 liters of water, and 1 kilogram of soya requires 1,800 liters of water. If we can do it locally, through more sustainable manner, that would be huge. And the third project that we are working now is, as I mentioned, to go completely on a different tangent and use alternative proteins, which reduces the water consumption by 90%. So these are the two challenges we have launched. One already given the prize, the second one, inshallah, soon in Q1.
Great, we look forward to hearing about who will get the second prize. That sounds really amazing. Dr. Rain, how is innovation plays into your flagship initiative?
So the reason I mentioned my background at the beginning was actually, and I should have said it in my earlier talk, is if we are serious about SDG 2 and accelerating progress, we need to think in totally different terms. It's nice that development governments, do development projects here and there targeting 10,000, 15,000 people. But the scale of the problem of the food crisis is so enormous that we do need to think in totally different terms. At the same time, especially, let's say, in European, US, Japan, traditional donors, budgets, public budgets are constantly shrinking, and for various reasons. And the situation will not get any better. So we do need to invest in something that makes sense, that is cost effective, and where you have a huge impact. And for example, the innovation cases that we as Innovation Commission are promoting, they are not expensive. For example, we just launched weather forecasting services for 10 million farmers in India, and this will now be scaled in up to 14 monsoon-affected countries of Southeast Asia together with the Asian Development Bank. And now also under this flagship, again, we already launched the first 2 projects, and there are a number of additional projects already in the pipeline that will kick off during the next year. So it's really investing in the right things, and again, it doesn't need to be expensive, because a lot of these things are already happening. It's just that they need to be scaled up. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is also the message that Christine gave us earlier on, scalability. You mentioned a lot of those things are not expensive.